Hey y'all, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming to you with the Dark Academia book tag. Catherine from Taking Tea with Catherine tagged me in this many months ago at this point, I believe, and I'm just now getting around to it. So if you have tagged me, forgive me. I am so far behind on tags. This tag was created by Emma over at the channel Emmy and Carolyn from Carolyn Marie Reads. So let's just get right into the questions. Question number one is, what is your favorite academia or dark book or movie? And I could really only think of one book that qualifies as dark academia that I have truly enjoyed, and that was If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This is kind of a Shakespearean dark academia, which I think is why I really enjoyed it. I loved everything that they were playing with. I loved all of the references it was making. Another series that I love that I am going to say qualifies as dark academia, though I can see that most people would probably say it does not, is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, or the All Souls trilogy, which is essentially really kind of paranormal romance for the most part. It's mainly about a witch and then the vampire that she falls in love with. Of course, other things are going on, but I think ultimately the series is often sold as kind of a paranormal romance, which I think does it a pretty great disservice. The main character, Diana, is an academic, and the large majority of kind of the mystery of the first book has to do with a manuscript that she looks at while she is researching something. And so I really think the series qualifies as dark academia, and if it does, it's probably my favorite dark academia. Number two is, what dead poet would you like to have a drink with? And oh, so many. So many. I would never want to meet Dante. I say this all the time, but to be frank, Dante is not on my list. But I would love to have a drink with Percy Shelley. Would love it. And many of the romantics could go here. Lord Byron. And I think in many ways, Lord Byron and I are into the same things, but I think I would get on with Percy Shelley personally better. But another interesting one would probably be Keats. I also think on a personal level that Keats and I would probably really get along, mostly because from what I've read about him, he does seem like he was really interested in history. He seems a bit like somebody that you would meet in your university history department, and I love that because I'm also somebody that you would meet in your university history department. He feels very much like a history major. So Keats is another really interesting option, and I could probably really get along with him, but I feel in my heart of hearts that I should go with Shelley, and so I'm going to go with Percy Shelley. He is definitely the poet that I would like to sit down and have a drink with. Number three is, what is your favorite painting and or sculpture? And I hope you're sitting down because you know we're not going to talk about only one thing, don't you? I think I will try to keep it very, very short, but my favorite sculpture is Perseus with the head of Medusa by Benvenuto Cellini. And I love this sculpture. Everything about this stuns me, and it's one that frequently rises in my estimation every time I look at it. I feel like I see something different to this sculpture every time I look at a picture of it, and it is on the Piazza della Signoria in Florence, and it is positioned in a way so that it looks like the head of Medusa is what turned Michelangelo's David to stone. There is a replica of the David out in the Piazza della Signoria, and it is so exquisite. I know that they had to have planned it like that, but there's just something so perfect about the way her eye line seems to go right to him, and I just love it. I also love a bronze sculpture. Sometimes I really like a bronze sculpture, and I just love this one. I love the positioning of his body, but I really love his hands and her hair. It is so great, and his foot on her body, incredible. The twisting of her body, everything about this is perfect. I truly love this sculpture. I also really love Apollo and Daphne by Bernini. And I know everybody loves Bernini because he is just so stunning. Everything he did was incredible. But this is the one that really amazes me because it catches Daphne right where she's turning into the tree. And so her fingers and her feet are starting to morph into flowers and roots. It's just absolutely exquisite. It seems impossible to me that somebody could have ever rendered that in stone. I mean, it just seems absolutely amazing to me that he was able to achieve what he did with this statue. In terms of my favorite paintings, my favorite painting of all time is Primavera by Botticelli. I love everything by Botticelli. I don't think he ever made a mistake. In my opinion, he didn't. But the Primavera is absolutely spectacular, and it's one that seems extremely special. And I was lucky enough to get to see this when I visited the Uffizi a few years ago. And it was one that took me completely by surprise. I went to kind of the Botticelli rooms to make sure I saw The Birth of Venus, of course. And that was the one that was really on my hit list. But it was Primavera that I came back to multiple times. I went into kind of the next room, came back multiple times, just to look at the Primavera again before I moved on. And so there's something about it that's really, really quite stunning. And I just love Botticelli's style in general. I think a lot of people say he typically makes the same face in every painting, and he does, definitely. But I like that face. So it doesn't really bother me that he kind of takes one muse and transposes her into all of his most famous works, because I just really like her look. I really love Botticelli. He is my favorite painter of all time. And if I can only choose one, I would pick the Primavera. Another of my favorite paintings is In a Roman Osteria by Carl Bloch, if I'm saying that correctly. He's a Danish painter, and I saw this when I lived in Copenhagen. It's at the SMK there in Copenhagen, and I actually lived across the street from the SMK. I lived in a kind of renovated army barracks that was there across the street from the SMK, and also across the street or adjacent to Rosenborg Castle in Copenhagen. But I love this because there's such a gossipy nature to this painting. It looks like they have just set eyes on you. They know that you are kind of eavesdropping on them, and they're judging you for it. They're judging you for it pretty harshly. Those are my favorite sculptures and my favorite paintings, but I also really love Canaletto. I can't believe I was going to forget Canaletto. And I don't have a favorite painting of Canaletto's. I just really love everything he did. Everything is stunning. And I particularly love anything he did in the city of Rome, and he kind of paints all of these ruins that are overrun with greenery and people walking among them. It's just incredible, because I think it's really hard to visualize the modern city of Rome ever looking the way that it did to Canaletto. And so I really love Canaletto as well. Number 4 is, what is your favorite architectural marvel? And who would I be if I didn't say the Florence Duomo? The Duomo of Florence stuns me every time I think about it. It's just genuinely beautiful, first of all, but it's also an incredible feat of architecture. And I was going to say that I could only pick one church, but every architectural marvel that I wonder at is absolutely a church. So another one would be York Minster. York Minster stuns me. Absolutely beautiful. That's probably my favorite church. And then I also, of course, love Chartres. I love Chartres. Chartres is really eye-catching because it has those 2 different towers on the front, and the stained glass is stunning. It's absolutely stunning. And I think when you go into any of these kind of Gothic cathedrals like the Duomo or like York Minster, like Chartres, I think you were genuinely amazed by what they were able to achieve in the time in which they were working, when they were constructing this. And so for me, what's really amazing about these churches is that often this would have been your skyscraper. Okay, so let's think for a minute. Let's say we live in the 1300s. We live in France. We live in Chartres. What is kind of the monument that lets us know we're getting home? You know, most of us nowadays would probably say we can see a hotel off in the distance, or we can see the city skyline kind of beckoning us home. But in the Middle Ages, the only buildings you probably would have been able to see from a long distance off would have been a church steeple, would have been a Gothic cathedral. And it absolutely dwarfs you and amazes you today, but I can only imagine if that was your only point of comparison. Like today, we're very familiar with skyscrapers. We're very familiar, just with tall buildings in general that are not really architectural marvels to us in the modern day. But I can only imagine if your only point of reference was kind of your neighborhood church, let's say like a one-room church that was constructed in 1000, and it doesn't have this stained glass. It doesn't have these kind of soaring ceilings. It doesn't have that bell tower. If you walked into, let's say, Notre Dame in Paris, would you not have been moved to tears just by how immense it was, just knowing that you were standing in a place like that and that you were so small compared to what that building is? All Gothic cathedrals amaze me. They are all architectural marvels in my opinion, but my favorites are York Minster and Chartres and the Duomo of Florence. I do think you can consider that Gothic, but those are my favorite architectural marvels. Number 5 is, what Shakespeare play would you want to play the lead in? And for me, that would be Julius Caesar. I like the fact that Julius Caesar is not in the whole play, and I think it's interesting to play a main character like that whose presence is felt maybe throughout the entire play, though your screen time is not very much. I was in the drama club when I was in high school, and I'm sure high school me would balk at not being the center of attention, being on stage every second of the play, but kind of adult me is really attracted to a figure like Julius Caesar, who kind of comes in, plays his part, and leaves about halfway through the play. Number 6 is, how many languages do you speak, and which language would you most like to learn? Unfortunately, I can only speak one language, and that's English. But I have big dreams of learning to speak French. I would love to learn to speak French or Italian. But I do think I have enough of a basis with my past in Latin to be able to tackle Italian or French one day. And I'm constantly disappointed with myself because I absolutely know I could get to a good point with Italian because I think that I can pronounce Italian much better than I can French, but I really love French, and I think French would be an incredibly useful language to have under your belt because it would open so many doors for you and you would be able to speak to so many people because French is such a universal language now. So French and Italian are my big dreams. I would love to be able to travel and not be stressed out about how a conversation is going to go. I'm not as stressed out about Italian as I am about French because Italians are very patient with you when you try. Italian, they absolutely are, but they automatically know you're not Italian when you try to speak Italian to them, and so they kind of switch to English and go, that was good, you're doing well, and then the rest of the conversation is in English. But when I've been to France, I think the attitude is, you can speak French. You started this in French. I think you can carry on the conversation in French. And so they're also very generous people, and it's really wonderful to kind of get immersed in the language because you absolutely have to learn to speak French. You have to turn your ear to understanding it to be in like a smaller town in France. And so that's really good from a learning perspective, really, really nerve-wracking from a traveling perspective. So I would like to alleviate those moments. I would like to be able to travel to a place like France very confidently, and also to other countries in the world where they speak quite a bit of French. French is becoming a massive universal language. I think it's one of the languages of the UN. And so I would love to speak French, but I would also love to speak Italian. Both of those are exquisitely beautiful languages. And I think if I put my mind to it, I could get there with both of them. Number 7 is, what is your favorite quote from poetry, prose, or plays? And I have so many favorite quotes. One that really sticks out to me is "The love that moves the sun and other stars" from Dante. In fact, I wanted to get a tattoo of the word stars in Italian behind my ear one time because stars is the last word in every canticle of Dante's Divine Comedy. It's the last word in Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. And so I used to want to get the Italian word for stars tattooed behind my ear, tattooed somewhere. I still think that's an interesting idea, an interesting ode to Dante, but that's often the quote that I think about. But recently I was reading some quotes from famous authors about the Colosseum. Why I found these quotes, I don't know. What am I going to do with them? I don't know. But one quote really, really stuck out to me as just being Absolutely exquisite. So this is by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who is a famous American poet. He's most famous for writing The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, which is a fantastic, fantastic poem. But this was what he wrote when he saw the Colosseum in 1828. Silence and the quiet moonbeams and the broad, deep shadows of the ruined wall. At length I came to an open space where the arches above had crumbled away, leaving the pavement an unroofed terrace high in the air. From this point, I could see the whole interior of the amphitheater spread out beneath me, half in shadow, half in light, with such soft and indefinite outline that it seemed less an earthly reality than a reflection in the bosom of a lake. I did not conjure up the past, for the past had already become identified with the present. I love the last line. That's probably my favorite quote right now, is I did not conjure up the past, for the past had already become identified with the present. And what better place to experience something like that than at the Colosseum? And also, because I am who I am, we have to have a quote from a romantic here. And so this is also about the Colosseum. I don't know what it is about quotes about the Colosseum that have been speaking to me lately, but this is from Lord Byron's Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, and every single bit of this poem is exquisite, but I love the section where he discusses the Colosseum. So this is some of my favorite poetry of all time. Truly it is. But when the rising moon begins to climb its topmost arch and gently pauses there, when the stars twinkle through the loops of time and the low night breeze waves along the air, the garland forest which the gray walls wear like laurels on the bald first Caesar's head, when the light shines serene but doth not glare, then in this magic circle raise the dead. Heroes have trod this spot, 'tis on their dust ye tread. He says quite a bit more about the Colosseum, but I do love heroes have trod this spot, 'tis on their dust ye tread. Absolutely beautiful. Number 8 is which fictional character's death is your ideal way to go? And I thought long and hard about this because most of the time when you read somebody dying in a book, it is not a very great way to go. So I decided to go with somebody from film, and that is Rose from Titanic. Clearly, this is spoilers for Titanic if you haven't seen it, but I do not want to hear any argument in the comments at all that she was dreaming at the end of Titanic. She was not. She moved on. Let's just deal with it. That is an absolutely exquisite ending to a perfect film, in my opinion. Titanic is my favorite movie of all time, but I do love how Titanic ends when Rose dies. And to me, she dies. To you, she may have been dreaming, but I love how the film ends and it pans all the pictures of her life where she did everything that she always said she was going to do, everything she ever dreamed of doing, everything Jack inspired her to do, and then it passes into her kind of afterlife where she's greeted by everybody on the ship who died and Jack is waiting for her. It's not so much that she saw everybody who died on the ship, or even that she died in her sleep, though that's really the true answer. But I just really love the fact that she died knowing she did everything that she wanted to do and knowing that she kind of closed the door on her life with absolute happiness. Rose's death is the death I would choose for myself. Number 9 is which university or college would you most like to attend? And so I would love to attend the University of York in England or the University of Nottingham. I will actually say the University of Nottingham, seriously, because I have researched them before because they have a program about Anglo-Saxon and Viking studies, and it would just be my absolute dream to study Anglo-Saxon and Viking studies in one of the 5 boroughs that was settled by Viking settlers in the Viking Age. That would just be my absolute and utter dream. And I would just love to go to Nottingham for a wide variety of reasons. I just think that it would be a city that would really agree with me. I know that York agrees with me. Everything about York appeals to me, so I would also love to go to the University of York. Number 10, what is your murder weapon or murder method of choice? And I have to go with the old tried and true Lucrezia Borgia way here with a poison ring. I feel like that's very Gothic. I feel like it's very Renaissance. And I feel like if I were a character in a book, That's the way I would do it. Not that I think the historical Lucrezia ever poisoned anybody with her poison ring. I'm sure some people will get mad about that because everybody nowadays kind of denies that Lucrezia was anything bad. But that's what the legend says, is that she killed her husbands with a poison ring. And I just think that's really cool. If I was a character in a book, absolutely, that's the way I would do it. Number 11 is, what mythology would you like to be a part of? And I would actually like to be a part of Norse mythology until Ragnarok. I would love to be a Valkyrie or something like that. I think that would be really great. Or a giant. I would like to be a frost giant, or just a giant in general. They're not generally much taller than human beings are, or the Aesir. Most of the time when you read about Norse myth, you kind of have in your head a giant would be like 9 feet tall, but that's not always the case with the giants of Norse myth. So I would just like to be a giant, a frost giant, or a Valkyrie. I think that would be really cool. Number 12 is, if you had to do a PhD, what would you choose to do it on? This is one that I've also thought long and hard about on days when I've kind of been daydreaming about stuff, and I absolutely know what I would do my PhD on. First of all, medieval history is what I would do it on, but I know that I would focus in on something very specific for my dissertation, and that would be the interaction of Christianity and the Old Norse religion during the Viking Age in England. I would love to kind of dig into graves and grave goods, how you were buried, what you were wearing, if you had your kind of hammer amulet on, the hammer of Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, or if you wore a cross, or if you wore both. I think it's really, really fascinating that in the Viking Age, there was quite a lot of overlap, specifically with kind of Danish settlers between the Old Norse religion and Christianity. And it was even the case with some Saxon people who kind of always missed the old religions when they moved into Christianity. And so you have a lot of people who had both, or who believed in both things. And I just think that's fascinating. That is what I would do my dissertation on, and I would get my PhD in medieval history. Number 13 is, which fictional character would you die for? And of course, none. But if I was in the fictional world, if I was in the story with them, I would die for Uhtred from The Last Kingdom in a heartbeat. I feel like if I was part of his gang, that he would really look out for me, and thus I would be extremely loyal to him, to the point where I would definitely die for him in battle. I definitely think Uhtred is probably the most likely character that I would die for, because if I was in the story with him, I feel like I would be so connected to him that I would do it without thinking, that I would kind of step in front of him in battle and take a sword blow for him. And also, if I was in the story, I would die for Finnick Odair in a heartbeat. Finnick from the Hunger Games, absolutely, because what was done to him was wrong. Absolutely wrong, and I still am upset about it. I love Finnick. Finnick is still, to this day, one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, and I get so angry when I think about what that final book did to him, so I would definitely probably die for him if I was in the Hunger Games. Now we have some rapid fire questions, so I can't really explain this. I'm just going to choose one or the other. So the first one is leather-bound or cloth-bound books. Cloth-bound. Dog-earing pages or highlighting pages. Highlighting. Sculptures or paintings. Sculptures. Piano or violin. Piano. Film or theater. Film. Poetry or prose. Right now I would say poetry, but normally I would say prose. 7 is museums or bookshops. Museums. Smell of books or smell of coffee or tea. Smell of coffee or tea. Fountain pen or typewriter. Typewriter. And new or used books. Used. Always used. So that was the Dark Academia book tag. If you have not yet done this tag, consider yourself tagged. I really love it. I love all of the questions here. And let me know down below your answer to some of these questions, especially the rapid fire questions. Do you prefer sculpture or painting? I feel like that's really, really hard. But that's going to be all for me today. I hope you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Goodbye.